Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. Welcome to the Vegan World 2026 Moonshot podcast. And today we are going to be talking with Mark Frischmuth of Democracy Lab, which is a very interesting uh, avenue for technical professionals to contribute to society. So let me bring Mark on board. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Good morning. Wonderful. Thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. A pleasure as always. It's fascinating. I was with you when we were both at the Local to Global Justice in ASU, and I was just fascinated by your story. So, just tell us how you got started on this. Who is Mark Frischmuth? Let's begin with that.
Sure. I am a married father of two wonderful daughters living in Missoula, Montana.
Mhm.
And the story of Democracy Lab dates back getting close to 20 years now. Back to the day after the 2004 presidential election in the United States,
Hmm.
which had been an election I had been personally invested in. I had put some time into. There were big things happening in the world, a war in Iraq,
Hmm.
um, lots of social issues at home, and the the candidate that I wanted to win did not. And
Hmm.
the next day, the media reported that America had voted its values, and that's why we had 4 more years of war in Iraq and other policies that I didn't particularly agree with. And the reason they said that America voted its values was that year there had been uh, anti-gay marriage initiatives on the ballot in swing states, and that had
Hmm.
been credited for driving uh, turnout among religious conservatives and others who didn't think that gays should have the right to get married, and
Hmm.
that had tipped the election towards the Bush administration and the continuation of the foreign policy that they had implemented. And so the question I found myself asking that next day was, what do the rights of gay people being able to marry or people not wanting gays to be able to get married have to do with war in Iraq? And
Right.
I was in a pretty depressed state and started to think about, well, what if we could use the internet to engage people on a massive scale and map out the connections between the values that were important to them, the objectives that they wanted to accomplish, and the policies that they wanted to see implemented.
Hmm.
And the idea was that if you did so, even people with very different views could find some common ground if you peeled back the layers far enough. And if you did, that you could have a more productive and civil conversation.
Right.
Um, and so we built a version of that. I guess I had the idea, talked about it with friends for a while. I eventually decided I needed to either do something about it or stop talking about it, and formed a nonprofit, recruited a board of directors, raised a little bit of money, made some really obvious mistakes, and built a version of that product that nobody really wanted to use. And then shortly afterwards, Obama got elected. In his first day in office, he signed the Open Government Directive saying that government would be participatory, transparent, and collaborative. And so I kind of breathed a sigh of relief and said, I don't have to do this anymore. The federal
Hmm.
government will. And I kind of went back to focusing on earning a living, which I had neglected a little bit over the previous couple of years. Um, but over a few years, it became apparent that the federal government wasn't, in fact, transforming, and that government wasn't participatory, collaborative, and transparent. And so I re-engaged in the space, but found a very different landscape. While in 2004, this was before crowdsourcing was a word, and I couldn't find anything like what I imagined on the internet. By about 2012, there were hundreds or thousands of iterations, different ideas about how to crowdsource public policy. And so I started to think less about how do you build the best version of a crowdsourcing tool, and more about why are so many really smart, well-intentioned people working in silos, competing when they could be collaborating, and having so little impact in the world. And that's what really triggered the pivot to what Democracy Lab is today, which is a platform connecting stakeholders in the Tech for Good ecosystem. And the first one that we really focused on is connecting skilled volunteers to Tech for Good projects. And what this does is it solves a what I call a cycle of futility in the tech nonprofit world, where
Mhm.
if somebody has a great idea for how tech can make the world a better place, they generally need money to build that tech product. They need to be able to demonstrate impact in order to raise money, and they need a tech product to create impact. And so it's this kind of catch 22 where this doesn't happen. And
Right.
so we've disrupted that cycle by making it possible for Tech for Good projects to launch using skilled volunteer labor.
Mhm.
And along the way, volunteers are able to gain experience, improve their skills, and advance their career, which is what we found is really a driving motivation for most of the volunteers who participate in our programs.
Yeah. So, name some of the companies that are involved in this. I mean, obviously, it's the employees who are contributing their skills, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and so there are, well, it's both companies that
Mhm.
are participating and just volunteers kind of all walks of life.
Mhm.
So, another thing we discovered is that we're not going to have a lot of success monetizing a connection between nonprofits and volunteers because
Mhm.
there's not a lot of ability to pay in either of those stakeholders. And we've discovered that though we're mission driven, it is very helpful to have money to sustain an organization. So
Right.
we've been doing Tech for Good employee engagement events. Probably the most recognizable company that we've worked with is Amazon, where we
Mhm.
engaged one of their teams to work on 9 different Tech for Good projects over a 24-hour period, and that was very successful. 3/4 of the employees there who participated said that participating in the program increased their enthusiasm for working at Amazon.
Mhm.
And so if that enthusiasm translates to increased retention, then that becomes an event that has a high return on investment for
Mhm.
a company like Amazon. But most of the participants in our platform are people who either have taken a break from work and they want to get back. This is what a lot of
Right.
people who take a break because they need to raise kids. They come back and they need to sharpen up their skills as they re-enter the workforce.
Mhm.
Um, or people who are looking to transition from one career to another. Maybe somebody was a software developer and they want to become a product manager. Maybe they
Right.
were in marketing and they want to do uh, user experience design.
Right.
There are all kinds of things that people are trying to do to find the job that's the best fit for them.
Mhm.
And participating in our platform has proven to be a great way for people to get experience that they can, highlight on their resume. They can talk about in interviews, all while making the world a better place by using technology for public good.
Right. So, do you allow people a group to come along and say, we want to work on one project with you, um, you know, and so get it done in 24 hours, something like that, right?
Well, it's definitely tough to get a project done in 24 hours.
Right.
What's I think really important for those type of sprints or hackathon type
Mhm.
situations is to really tightly define a scope of work that
Mhm.
is achievable,
Mhm.
because the wicked problems of the world aren't getting solved in a day. These are
Right.
lifetime endeavors to try and address these really difficult problems. But it is possible to move the needle on a specific uh, product or project.
Mhm.
And it's just all about really clearly defining what it is that is trying to be achieved in a period of time, what resources are available, what's in scope, and very importantly, what is out of scope,
Right.
uh, and then creating an environment where people can focus and execute and have fun in the process.
Right. Right. So, what are, I mean, how does a nonprofit enter? I mean, decide that they want to avail of your platform.
Well, basically, the easy thing is to click the button that says create a project.
Right.
That is um, we've tried to make that as friction free of an experience as we can. And
Hmm.
so, once somebody who leads a nonprofit or a Tech for Good project clicks that create a project button, they're walked step by step through a workflow that nudges them towards being transparent and open
Hmm.
with their work products. We
Hmm.
found that that can be very helpful and important in making the relationship between a volunteer and the project leader as
Hmm.
efficient as possible. When we started out, we interviewed a bunch of Tech for Good project leaders, a bunch of volunteers who do this kind of work, and we heard a couple of important things. One was that project leaders often complain that the cost of onboarding new volunteers
Hmm.
could exceed the benefits, and volunteers often complain that projects weren't well enough organized for them to be able to plug in and start making a difference right away.
Right.
And so the insight we took from those observations was that both could be addressed through greater transparency.
Hmm.
So when a project is posting on Democracy Lab to seek volunteers, they're encouraged to link through to things like their GitHub repo, if it's a software development project,
Hmm.
their Figma file, or whatever design tool they're using to develop their wireframes and interfaces, uh,
Hmm.
their Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever they're using for a shared file system,
Hmm.
the messaging tools that they're using, whether it's Slack or Microsoft Teams or Discord or whatever it might be,
Right.
make all of these resources facing. And what that does is it makes it possible for a volunteer to dig
Hmm.
as deep as they want to into a project. And so when they reach out to a project leader, they're not reaching out to say, hey, this looks kind of interesting. What can you tell me about it?
Right.
They're they're reaching out to say, I've read everything you posted. I want to start now. What's my first task?
Hmm.
And so it's a very different entry point, and it can save that project leader an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of time for every volunteer that they're looking to onboard, and that can make a really big difference in the success of a project.
Okay. So when you say it walks through the process of adding a project, does it also recommend that you go through, you have a certain project management tool? Like, do you use Trello for project management, or is that
Yeah, we do. Personally, Democracy Lab as a project uses Trello.
okay?
We suggest, give a few examples of the types of tools that people use for
Hmm.
this. And when we're suggesting examples, we tend to suggest ones that are free, um, and not all are open source, but free is probably more important than open source when a project is just in those early stages of getting started.
Right. Do you also allow, I mean, website development and things like that as projects that you support for
Yeah,
nonprofit?
so basically the criteria are that for a project to be on Democracy Lab are that it either needs to be um, creating public benefit,
Hmm.
and this is most easily assessed if it is a nonprofit. Then that is obviously
Hmm.
creating public benefit, or it's been sort of decreed by a government agency that it's creating has a charitable purpose, or
Mm-hmm.
it could be a government project, um, or it could be creating public intellectual property. So things that are open source, that are Creative Commons, that public intellectual property is a public benefit. And
Mm-hmm.
then where there's a little bit of a gray area are uh, for-profit social enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
We prefer that there be either explicit public benefit or explicit public intellectual property. But when there's something like a social enterprise that is, creating, you know, um, cost-effective clean water solutions, as an
Right.
example,
Mm-hmm.
then we have to evaluate those projects a little bit more closely
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that the public benefit is significant enough to merit inclusion. And then we also have to make sure that it's understood on the part of the project leaders what they need to be, how they need to be managing these volunteer relationships and not displacing employees. It would be illegal for these companies to just simply circumvent minimum wage laws, by
Right.
treating volunteers like employees.
Right. Right. Now, when a technical volunteer comes to your website, can they choose what they want to work on, and do they have a commitment to make when they do that?
They definitely can choose what they want to work on. Um, each project is going to have its own guidelines for sort of the minimum acceptable commitment that
Mm-hmm.
they want volunteers to to commit to. The For Democracy Lab as a project, we're definitely eating our own cooking. We
Mm-hmm.
are a project, one of many projects on the platform that we've created. When volunteers come and approach us, we ask that they be willing to commit 5 hours or more a week for roughly 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found is that if volunteers are willing to make that commitment, then they make a real contribution to the project. If they're not able to make that kind of commitment, then oftentimes kind of that cost to benefit uh, ratio gets out of whack, and
Right.
there's more cost in getting a volunteer oriented and to the work and engaged with the team than they end up actually contributing to the project. So we express that as a guideline. There's really no enforcement that
Right.
is
Right.
feasible with uh, volunteers, but we express that as a guideline, and people are generally pretty respectful of that.
Right. 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 So tell us about what you're doing on Earth Day this year.
Yeah, yeah, we have a really exciting event coming up called the 48-hour Earth Day, and we've been doing hackathons since our platform launched. When we first launched, we had a two-sided marketplace connecting projects and volunteers, but we didn't have any projects and we didn't have any volunteers. So we decided to host a hackathon and kind of throw a party and see who would come. And the response was really positive for that. So we started doing these events every other month. And then once the pandemic hit, all of these events went from being in person in Seattle to virtual. And
Mhm.
once that change occurred, we started to see that we had projects starting to come from all over the world, volunteers starting to participate from all over the world. But we're still sticking with the kind of the Pacific time zone for the events, which was limiting for a lot of these other projects and a lot of these other volunteers. So we've
Right.
decided to shake things up a little bit with our next event, which is coming up on April 21st through 23rd. Earth Day is the 22nd. It
Mhm.
will start first at the stroke of midnight in New Zealand, in
Mhm.
the UTC plus 12 time zone. So
Right.
that's when the event will start, is when Earth Day starts in New Zealand. And 48 hours later, the event will end in the UTC minus 12 time zone, which includes Howland Island. It's
Right.
a a rock in the Pacific, not with very many people, but that's the last place on Earth that it will be Earth Day. And
Right.
so what we're going to do is just have numerous sort of kickoff sessions throughout those 48 hours so that projects are able to, kind of launch their effort, start working, recruit
Hmm.
team members at whatever time it's convenient for them in that stretch. And then we'll have MCs who are participating from around the world. We're partnering with Code for All Network, which includes organizations like Code for America, Code for Australia, Code for Japan, uh,
Hmm.
Code for Pakistan, Code for Poland. We can work our way across all of the different time zones and find organizations that are part of the Code for All network.
Right.
And we're really encouraging these organizations, their projects, their volunteers to participate in the event and help address some of these wicked problems, including climate change and other environmental issues that Earth Day is really meant to be all about.
Right. Right. That's fascinating. So you have, I mean, all these. Approximately how many people do you expect to be working on Earth Day for the?
That is a great question, and we'll know when the event actually kicks off.
Right.
Our events have typically attracted 100 to 150 people. This event is a longer event, and we're hoping that we'll have quite a bit more folks turn out.
Hmm.
Um, but there's a lot of work goes into promoting the event and getting people to sign up. But if we could have 500 people or 1,000 people participate over the course of these 48 hours, we would be thrilled.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. It, I'm just fascinated by that idea of everyone coming together on over those 2 days and solving problems for the planet, right? And to me, it's something that I'm going to promote it to all my classmates and say, because most of them are almost retired, right? So come
Mhm.
on, let's all get together and work on something together.
Yeah.
So this is why I asked: is there something that we can say this whole group is going to work on this together?
Well, I think that would be very possible to do, either to find a project that is signed up and kind of
Hmm.
rally your friends or colleagues and
Right.
uh, participate in that one particular project together, or to start a project. So it may be that Climate Healers says, "Oh,
Hmm.
well, this is something we've been wanting to get to, but we haven't had a good opportunity to work
Right.
on." And so, create a project, submit it for the event, and then get your friends and colleagues to participate in contributing to the project that you lead would
Right.
be another way of making sure that you have a fun project to work on.
Right. 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 I mean, we don't have to even wait for Earth Day. Maybe that's when we all come together and push it to the end, right? So
Right.
we start working on it now when we submit a project. Is that right?
Yeah, that's this event is meant to be sort of a moment of focus and synchronous effort,
Hmm.
but pretty much all of these problem or projects are long-term projects. So they are not going to. Most of them don't start won't start at the event. They won't finish at the event. They
Hmm.
will make lots of progress at the event. And they
Right.
will complete those very specific and well-defined scopes of work at the event. Um, but these problems that we're trying to address will take lots of effort over lots of time. Um, and but and I think another thing that's really important though is it's not just what the project
Hmm.
accomplishes. It's also about the relationships that are built
Right.
among the team members and between and the long-term relationships between the volunteers and the projects, because many folks find a project at a hackathon, and then they contribute to it for a year or two or more,
Yeah.
because it's something that really becomes important to them, and a way for them to make a difference in the world in a tangible way. I
Mhm.
think a lot of people feel a bit helpless, a bit powerless,
Right, right,
and
right.
it's especially easy to feel that way right now
Mhm.
with so many, with the war in Ukraine happening,
Mhm.
where the people are dying, we're destroying cities, when
Right.
all of that. All of the energy that goes into conducting a war could be much more productively used addressing you know the other issues that we'll try to fix on Earth Day or address on Earth Day.
Right.
Um,
I mean, it's sort of it seems so anachronistic, right? Meaning, they are fighting a war that they should have been fighting that in the 19th century or 20th century, not in the 21st century. It's just doesn't make any sense that we are resolving problems this way, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it is depressing.
Well, it is. I mean, I'd say it's a 19th century mindset and the 20th century process being used to solve 21st century problems. It's not
Yeah,
going to work. Yeah.
no.
Yeah. So, it is. Uh, to me, it is fascinating what you're trying to do. Getting people to come together to solve problems like this. So, how are you marketing your Earth Day hackathon?
Well, it's primarily, there's no magic to it. It's social media, it's newsletters,
Mm,
it's word of mouth. We hopefully, as Earth Day approaches, we'll get some attention from media that will make the event visible to more people. But it's something that anybody can do is RSVP for the event. Like posts on social media, reshare them on social media. I mean, it's really just about trying to create the buzz about the event, that within our own networks, so
mm,
that more people are aware of it and choose to participate. And so I'm very thankful that you're have invited me to this podcast to
right.
share the information about the event with your audience.
No, thank you for being here. In fact, I'm going to put your website on the chat so everyone knows. It's democracylab.org, right?
Yes.
So do people have to register in order to volunteer?
Yeah, it is. They certainly can just show up on the day of the event, but
Hmm.
it's going to be much easier if they do RSVP ahead of time.
Hmm.
And that what that does is we'll then be able to communicate with them to share more information about the event as it gets closer. We're also rolling out some new features to the platform
Hmm.
in advance of the event, and so we want to be able to share those with people ahead of time, so they know what to expect, and they can make their time as productive and fun as possible on the day of on Earth Day.
Right, right. Is there an approval process for projects that are approved that are going to be worked on Earth Day?
Yeah, basically, it is a pretty easy one. People need to create their project. We look at it. We make sure that yes, this meets the kind of the definition of tech for good that we discussed earlier. And so long as it does, then we approve the project, um, and then it can be part of the event. But it's fairly straightforward, as long as what we've seen is that even on a platform like Democracy Lab, trying to help people use tech for the public benefit, we see some malicious actors every once in a while, so we just have to screen those out.
How do you screen those out? How does that happen?
Oh, we just look at the project. There's when somebody submits the project, we get an email, we look at it, and if it's it's pretty obvious when it's malicious usually, and then we just don't approve it.
No, but do you also get malicious volunteers who work on projects who are trying to mess things up?
We have not,
Okay.
and that's good. It certainly seems like a possibility, and that at some point down the road we will probably have to worry about that more than we have. But
Mhm.
to this point, at least, we've really been blessed and fortunate to have had uh, a community of really wonderful people
Mhm.
choose to participate in the projects and the events that we've been doing. And so we have had, few to none, negative interactions among, between team members, and between projects and their volunteers. So been, very fortunate that everybody kind of brings their best self
Right.
uh, to this kind of work.
Awesome. Awesome. Can you name some projects that have come out of Democracy Lab that you're proud of? Like,
Yeah, definitely. One that pops to mind that is, very relevant to Earth Day is the Orca Sound project, which is
mm,
a Seattle-based project that has built a online app that allows people to listen to hydrophones that are around the Puget Sound and detect orcas. They also have used that same technology to uh, build a tool to detect ship noise.
mhm,
The ships that sail through the Puget Sound can be very disruptive to orcas, and
mhm,
so by being able to detect ships that are, for whatever reason, not performing as they should from an audibility standpoint,
mhm,
they're able to flag those ships and help them take corrective action so that the habitat for the orcas is uh, is better. That's one that I think has made big strides over the years through Democracy Lab. Um, Another that I'm really excited about is that's less directly related to the environment is the Council Data Project. Um, this is another project that originated in Seattle. What it does is it takes videos that city councils publish. Most city councils and other governments around the United States and many around the world publish videos of their meetings and their proceedings. What this project does is it transcribes those videos and makes them searchable. So you can just type in a term into a search bar, much like you would in Google or Bing or any Yahoo, any search engine, and it finds all the instances where that term was used across these different city council meetings, sorts them by relevance, and then lets you click into those meetings, seeing every point in the transcript where that term was used, and queues up the video to that point in the transcript. Um, so the effect is it makes government much more accessible to the average person.
mhm,
While if I wanted to find out what was going on in local government, the way cities publish these videos, I might have to sit and watch 10 hours of video to find the places where they discuss the thing I'm interested in. Using this tool, I can save 9 hours and 59 minutes out of that time, and have a much higher degree of confidence that I'm actually finding what I'm looking for by just typing in the term, pulling it up, and then seeing exactly where this was discussed. So, I recently moved from Seattle to Missoula, Montana, and right now we're working on implementing this for the city of Missoula. And once this is done, then we'll look to do it for other cities across Montana and the state legislature, and roll it all into an openmontana.org domain name where all of these resources are available to everyone in the state. That's another one that is interesting and exciting. But
right.
so there are 160-ish projects on Democracy Lab right now, and each one has their own story and their own impact, and have received different kinds of benefits from being part of the platform, part of the events that we do.
Right. That's
But
amazing.
yeah, it's been really exciting to see, because it was all fairly theoretical a few years ago, that
Right.
if we build a platform like this, that these tech for good projects will accomplish things that otherwise they wouldn't have.
Right.
That was the hypothesis, and
Mhm.
it's been great to see that validated, and to see many of these tools being used in ways that are definitely having an impact and making the world a better place.
Yeah. So, so the one condition you have is that everything has to be open source, right? When you
No, it does not. It
not
could
okay.
be, yeah. So if let's just suppose that that Greenpeace, as an example, of a nonprofit, wanted to uh, create a tech product. Um, Certainly, in my opinion, they ought to make it open source, but
Mhm.
but to be eligible to participate in Democracy Lab, it doesn't have to be. The fact that it's benefiting a nonprofit means that even if they're building proprietary software, they can use the Democracy Lab platform to attract volunteers to do it. Uh,
Mhm.
Kind of in my mind, the best projects are ones that are both open source and for nonprofits or governments.
Right.
Um, but they don't have to be. If it's benefiting a nonprofit or a government, it's okay if it's using proprietary software. We've also found that a lot of um, tech for good efforts are early stage enough that they haven't made all of those decisions. They
Right.
haven't figured out yet if they want to be a nonprofit uh, organization, or a social enterprise, or just an informal group of folks. They haven't decided if they want to make their project open source or not, and we give them space to make progress and figure some of those things out.
Right.
Uh, but just ask them that if they do decide that they're going to be a for-profit entity building proprietary software, that they then talk to us about, you know, is this project still a good fit to be part of this platform or
Mhm.
not?
Right. Fascinating. Are there any last comments that you want to leave our viewers with? No.
I think the big one is just that getting involved is really important. That
Mhm.
it is um, it's awfully easy to kind of get into doom scrolling, where you just read about all of the terrible things that are happening and feel like that there's nothing that any of us can do about it, because these problems are all so much bigger than we are.
Right.
And that's not a healthy place to be. It's not a healthy way to feel.
Right.
And by just getting involved in taking action, however small it may seem, you
Mhm.
can change yourself, while doing your part to change the world. Um, and if we all do that, our chances of success go way up, and we may have a future that we can be proud of.
On that note, what a beautiful way to end. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, and thank you very much for including me in this. This was wonderful to be part of.
Yeah.